everyone, welcome. Thank you again for coming today. Please feel free to say hello in the chat and let us know where you're from. Thank you for joining us for From Idea to Impact, How to Start a STEM Club that Engages and Inspires with Nancy Scales Coddington. Nancy is the owner of SciComm Solutions. She's a STEM consultant and she's the founder of STEM Socialite. She is a STEM education consultant for over 24 years of experience in designing and leading STEM clubs, programs, and educator trainings. A former public media producer, she specializes in making STEM engaging, accessible, and sustainable for both in-school and out-of-school learning spaces. Nancy serves as an advisor for PBS Kids educational content and is a board member of the Science Teacher Associations of New York State. So I'm going to welcome and pass it over. Let me quickly make you co-host. And now I will pass it over to Nancy to get started.
Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Really appreciate your time. I know how busy everybody is, and it seems like there's never a slow time. Anytime I hear somebody say, "Oh, we'll do that," when it's slow, and I'm like, when is that? People say that, but I don't think that ever really actually ever happens. So as Abby mentioned, I am Nancy Scales Coddington, and I do have my own company called SciComm Solutions. I do STEM consulting. I work with children's media. I work with several PBS stations. I used to work at a local affiliate and now do a lot of national work. And I would like to thank Abby. Thank you so much for having me today, and the New York State Network for Youth Success. It is a great resource. I highly recommend. I mean, you've probably found out about this from them. If not, I encourage you to get on their mailing list. They offer some great professional development for educators, especially out of school educators. And they have a great conference that they do in the spring. All good stuff there. And I'm sure Abby can put more info in the chat for you for those who are interested, excuse me. So yeah, we are going to talk about starting a STEM club. And that might seem pretty daunting, thinking, okay, I'm not maybe a science, tech, engineering, or math person. How do I actually do this that my kids are going to like it and that I feel like I know what I'm talking about? Because sometimes that can be really intimidating if that is not a background that you do come from. And I want to let you know that you do not need to be a STEM expert to lead a great STEM club. You just need to have curiosity and a plan. And so a STEM club doesn't have to be a huge lift. In fact, it can be small intentional steps. And there's people that can help and support you along the way doing that. So you're not necessarily doing this alone. And you can always reach back out to me with questions and any of that as we get into it. I'd like to do just a quick icebreaker opening and find out. It's great to see where everybody's coming from. There's some familiar faces. Very excited to see that. But what are you hoping to get out of today's workshop? You can either write that into the chat or you can unmute yourself. What are you hoping to get out of today's workshop? Everyone's reaching for the chats. If it's easier just to unmute, you can certainly do that. Erin, I see that you're juggling multiple things. It's nice to have you on here. Abby's literally juggling multiple. Rachel Risberger from OWL in Oneonta wants to create programming at OWL, and OWL is a great resource for out of school time doing different activities up in the Oneonta area in New York. Erin wants to come and support. Thank you. Work with teachers and would like to see how we can support them. Great. So I'm going to be giving a bunch of different resources today. So I hope that you walk away with some really good things. Sean says something useful for reorganizing my current clubs and networking. Yes, absolutely. That's one of the good things about these workshops is one, you can always leave with something, right? As educators and learners, we're always walking away with at least probably one thing, and networking is an amazing opportunity. So I highly encourage everybody to share your contact information or maybe your LinkedIn information in the chat if that is something that you would like to do. Okay, I see that I'm like jumping behind on my slides. Here we go. Oop. So today, this is what we are going to be covering. We are going to talk about the key components of a successful STEM club, and we are going to be giving an overview. I am going to do a little bit of deeper dive into some things, and if you have questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We're going to keep an eye on that, and again, or unmute yourself and ask those questions as we go. I don't mind people breaking in and doing that. So we are going to identify some of those logistics, and we are going to talk about some of the other things like partners, role models, and collaborators for your club activities too. So first thing that we want to do is, I guess, start right with the basic. Sounds like people that are here today do have a sense of creating clubs and organizing events and after school programming. As Jamie has put into the chat, that works with after school programs and middle school participants and looking for STEM activities as well as SEL activities. But if you were to define a STEM club, how would you do that? What is that definition of a STEM club? And I'm going to be using the word STEM because that is how I refer to science, technology, engineering, and math. However, art is also a huge component of this. One of the reasons I think that we lean back so heavily on the word STEM, besides adding extra acronyms, is it really depends a lot on who is helping to fund some of your projects. And STEM is the most recognized verbiage for that. Obviously, if you're working with an arts organization, you want to make sure that you are highlighting that A. But so our definition of our STEM is a group that provides engaging science, technology, engineering, and math activities outside of that traditional classroom setting. So it can be before school, it can be during the middle of the day, it can be after school, it can be summer, it can be weekends, it can be in all those different places. And I'm going to highlight just a couple things. I'm not going to go through all the nitty-gritty of the next few slides, but there's huge benefits to hosting clubs like this. And those of you who do work with students see these kind of benefits all the time, right? There's an opportunity to use those critical thinking skills to have that deeper dive and apply what students are learning in school. Teachers are so taxed with time and state requirements. There's not a lot of opportunity for that extra communication and teamwork and innovation. So this is the spaces to be able to take those things that they've learned and apply it to bigger projects. So students really have that opportunity. It's also a great way to connect careers with things that are happening in STEM or in school. When we learn in a traditional classroom setting, we're often learning in silos. So we're going to our math, and then we're going to our English, and then we're going to our social studies. That's not how the real world works. You know, when it's time to write a grant, you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to have my English class, and now I've got to do the budget. So there's math class. It's all integrated together. And so this is a way to help break down some of those silos as well, so that students can see this is how the real world operates versus some of the things that they are used to as they are growing up in school. So the benefits for you as an educator are to help supplement. If you are a classroom teacher, this is a great way to supplement and add on different activities. This is also a really good opportunity to help your students see themselves as scientists, to see themselves as engineers. Again, that's another thing that's very removed is people who aren't super into science or technology. They might be like, oh, you know, I got a C in science, you know, this might not be for me, which is not true. I love to call these people STEM curious. And this is exactly who we want in these spaces because it's a great opportunity to find the things that you like and also find the things that you maybe don't like. Those are just as important, right? and having that opportunity to be able to use those skills and develop them. And then there's even a benefit for our community to having these kind of clubs and organizations, because as our students get older and they graduate and go on to college, this is very much a place that can spark that love or creativity and create that pipeline for STEM careers and STEM professionals. And we actually have someone with us today, Julia, who was part of a Side Girl program back in the day with Owl and her mom, Rachel. So we'll talk about that a little bit but this is a great example of how making that STEM club and offering that space and nurturing that excitement has led to someone going to school in a technology space, in a computer software programming and gaming, which is really exciting. It's also another great way for the community to get involved with what's happening in your space in your school or your after school program or your museum or science center. And if you're not a STEM person, then totally okay. You do not need to be the expert. And I think with everybody having one of these in your hands, good or bad, right? Our phones, our computers, you can look up everything and you can encourage your students to look up things. So you don't have to be the person who has all of the answers. In fact, you shouldn't have all of the answers because it encourages them to be able to learn how to find that information. So I'd like to call this position kind of that cruise director position. You don't have to have the answers, but you do know how to have that, assemble that team to make your club successful. So I'd like to talk about your why. Like, what is your why for wanting to start a STEM club? Why do you want to do that? And Erin, I cannot believe that you have a child graduating with biochem. Time is going by so quickly. That was in the chat. So what is your why? Why do you want to start a STEM club? Why do you want additional resources? Why do you want to reorganize your current clubs? Why are you doing any of this? You can unmute, you can type in the chat, whatever works for you. Sean says, I enjoy it, and I know some kids will too. So there's that personal connection, which I love. So you're doing something that you enjoy and is super fun, and you know that your kids are probably going to think that as well. That's awesome. Erin, students need to be curious. Learning involves a lot of non-tangibles that schools can't seem to provide. Absolutely. So your why is being able to provide that space for that curiosity and being able to explore that. Absolutely. And curiosity, right, seems to really be the base of all of this. Is your why about boosting confidence and creativity? You know, that might be a reason that you're doing it. Or maybe your why is to explore careers and connect with role models. Rachel says, I enjoy informal learning, especially in STEM, and I see how these things have a positive impact on her own children. Yes, and Rachel's daughter, Julia, is the one I was referring to earlier. Thank you. So yeah, what is your why? These are all great examples of why to have a STEM club, why to create spaces like that. Preparing your students, developing those critical thinking, providing those hands-on learning experiences that complement the classroom curriculum, everything that you were saying, and all the reasons why these things are so incredibly important. So depending on funding has always been one of the big, I guess, elephants in the room, right? Is how do we do some of these things on such a small budget? But when you're looking to get funds either from a community organization or from a partnership, it's really great to be able to say, this is why we're doing this. And here is the mission behind what we're doing. So this is something to consider when you are looking to help build those extra partnerships. And maybe this isn't something you want to tackle when you're first doing your STEM club, but it is something to consider down the road. But especially looking at, you know, what are those core values? What are those 3 to 5 words that represent your club that you want to instill into those members. And this also goes back to your why, but what would be some of those core words that you want to make sure that when you're meeting with your students that you're actually hitting? What positive impact do you hope your club will have on students learning and their future aspirations? I'd love to see if you want to just type in the chat just a few words that represent what you hope to instill in your members. This doesn't need to be long. It can be just single words. What are you hoping that your students walk away with after they've participated in your STEM program? Jamie, confidence. I love that. Absolutely. Confidence is huge, especially when we're talking about helping to build STEM identity within our kids and letting them know that they are scientists, that they are engineers, that they can be doing these things. Curiosity and confidence, says Rachel. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, those are great, great core words for your club's mission. So one of the first things, again, when we're talking about beginning your STEM club, especially when we're going to be looking to put pen to paper or typing to send off for either grant applications or those community partnerships, is having that goal setting. So part of what we're going to do is I would like you to take a couple minutes to think about what would be those 2 to 3 goals that are going to be your touchstones for your after school program? What are those? And those can build off of those, the core words that we started putting into the chat with the confidence and the curiosity. So is your goal to introduce students to local STEM careers and local role models? Is your goal to create a space for students so they know that they can come and tinker and build and there's no judgment on what they're doing? There's no pressure. Is your goal to help students feel more confident when they're in those spaces, whether they're using tools or they're going through that engineering design process? What are those goals? Sean says, tinker and build, but oh, I'm going to judge. That's really funny because that came out of my mouth. I was thinking about that too. Judge, but in a good way, right? Like we want to encourage them to keep tinkering and building. But yeah, that's funny. What other goals do you have in mind? Does anybody want to come off mute and share what they wrote down? Sean says, we have a social mission, changing attitudes about physics by changing what physics is about, that scholars can redirect the field away from misanthropic ventures. Oh, I like that. Rachel, Julia says, exposure to things not traditionally taught in a classroom, for example, programming. Aaron, empower children to believe that they can change the world. These are fantastic goals, and I'd love to see that we have mission statements already wrapped up and ready to go. So it sounds like everyone's a little bit in their much more advanced part of having their STEM clubs, which is good. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker through the mission piece of this because it sounds like those are already defined. And if they're not, totally okay. I have created a handout in a shared doc that Abby's going to put the link into the chat of resources, but talks about how do you actually create that mission statement as you get ready to move into that piece of your STEM club. If you're doing this in the school, some schools do require you to submit this if it is a school sanctioned after school program. But that mission statement should define those core values and those goals that we were talking about and that why that we were sharing all of those core words for. So really exciting. Okay, let's jump into some of those logistics, the nitty gritties. Meeting schedules. When do you meet? When is a good time to meet? When is there ever a good time to meet? That is always the question, right? Anybody here who's been to meetings, especially community meetings, at the very end, as you're setting your next one, everyone pulls out their calendars. So my suggestion is starting with what's manageable for you and your students. Uh, don't bite off more than you can chew. So when you're thinking about meeting frequency, are you going to meet weekly? You do not need to meet weekly. And if that sounds like it's going to be overwhelming, back that off and meet twice a month and do bi-weekly meetings. Or maybe you can only do once a month. And that's going to depend on the day that you also meet. So if you're doing something on a weekend, trying to do activities every single weekend is challenging for families. So considering that in your plan as you are designing. When is the best time to meet in that? Is it going to be after school? Is it going to be during the lunch break for kids? Is it going to be after at the end of the day or on weekends? So taking all those things into consideration and also thinking about those potential barriers for students and families, such as transportation. So if you are going to do a STEM club and you are not already plugged into a school, is transportation for your kids going to be an issue? Is that something that's going to be need to consider to receive funding for? Uh, all things to think about. There's no wrong answer here. And another thing you might want to consider is when you're first starting this out, or maybe when you're doing different themes, running a program for 4 to 6 weeks is totally acceptable. Don't think that you have to do this for the whole school year or the whole summer or a whole quarter. You can meet with your club, maybe it's only going to be 3 times, and that's okay. That would conclude a project that you are working on under a specific theme. So start with what's manageable for you and for your students because you want to excite them. You don't want to burn them out. And you also don't want them to feel bad if they can't make meetings if you're working on one progressive project to get to the end. When we're thinking about location, some of you already have your locations either in your school already or in an out of school space if you're in a museum or a science center. And some of you might need to actually find that space in the community. So working with local partners is a great opportunity to find those spaces. If you can get a space that you can continually come to, that is ideal. That way you can create a space that your kids feel safe in to tinker and to try different things. And what I mean by that is having a space that's welcoming. You've got posters on the wall of scientists. You have quotes that have encouraging statements on there. So when they come in there, they know that this is a space to be creative. This is a space that is welcoming and I am wanted here. That is, well, that might seem well, something that like, oh, that's silly. Why do we need to do that? It does make a difference. And for some students, it makes a big difference having just that space where they feel really welcomed and that they know, okay, this is where I know that I'm going to be able to express myself and really dive into my creativity because of the space that they're in and they feel welcome when they're there. So meeting them at the door, welcoming everybody, having a snack before you start, depending on the time of day, if it's appropriate, all different ways to make that location in that room a warm and welcoming place for your kids. I also encourage you in the very beginning of your STEM club, if you're going to be running these, for example, on that 6 week time frame that I gave, is have your students work with you to create those club roles. And again, that might be something like, oh, we don't have time for that. Why do we do that? That is really important because it helps to set the tone for your STEM club. You know, whether you are going to do it for the school year or for half a semester, it lets them know that they, one, are part of helping to create the rules of that space. and two, that there are roles, because as you start to get into doing your activities, there's going to be groups that are going to work together a lot, and there might be some competitions, but you also want there to be that safe space where students can have those challenges, um, friendly challenges, but there's not a feeling of one person is better than the other or somebody is smarter than somebody else at the other table. And it lets them know that they have expectations that when they come into this space and they come into this room, everybody's there to learn. And you want to have that be that equal playing space, is we're all here to learn and do the same projects. Even though we're all bringing different experiences to the table, we do need to respect each other and act accordingly. And if they're part of creating those rules, it's easy to be able to point to that and say, okay, hey, remember what you guys created in the beginning of the year. Let's remember those and let's act accordingly. Helping with that classroom management that unfortunately can feel like it takes away from some of the fun, but is super important so that, again, everybody knows that they're welcome in that space. And don't let some of that stuff go too long, because it's then harder to correct and harder to stop. Having those images of STEM role models that I did mention, there is an amazing resource for role models, one of them being the If Then collection. And this is a collection of 125-ish women role models in all different careers, all different walks of life. And they are highlighted in this collection. You can print off posters, there's videos, there's activities, there's all kinds of different things to check out. But that would be an example of having some images. And there's all kinds of fun posters. I know that we've all seen the one with Einstein on it, helping just to set that stage of learning and excitement. And then you can have your students help to create that space as well, with either the drawings or the learnings that they do, or by bringing in their own things. Okay, so let's dive into themes. So in your STEM clubs or in your STEM spaces, are you using themes now that correlate to a time frame? So if you're going to run a 4-week program, does it have a theme to it? Or are you just doing different activities every single time that you are getting together? And that's totally fine too. I'm just curious where people are with themes for their after school, out of school time STEM clubs. So you can mute, you can type it in the chat. Are you using themes? Is the STEM club the theme? So anything that falls underneath science, tech, engineering, or math. Sean says, got ready for the eclipse. Probably otherwise, it's pretty ad hoc. Totally fine. Yeah, the eclipse was a great and easy one to theme around, right? Hard to believe that's been a year already. So working within themes helps to organize your content, and role models or even local partnerships that you might want to bring in with your after school programs or out of school programs. So it helps to focus those activities. It also lets your students know what to expect. So if it's going to be an engineering theme for 4 weeks, they know they're going to be doing engineering activities. It's also helpful for you to narrow down who you might want to bring in as a guest, an expert. And that is a great connection for your students to take the activities that they're doing and make that connection to somebody in the real world does this or similar work and gets paid for it. Which is incredibly powerful for them to be able to see that type of shift. So even though they might be making something as simple as a paper tube rocket or tower, that those skills transfer to jobs later down the road. And so it's really nice to be able to have them be able to recognize that and have that aha moment when they're talking to or seeing a role model from their community. So I'm just going to give some examples of some STEM club themes. This was a virtual STEM club that I did while I was at the regional PBS station, and it was for kindergarten through second grade students and their families. And because it was virtual, we were able to pull the families in as well. And then it also reduced the barrier of transportation. We did send out low-cost materials to our students for these activities. We did meet weekly for 4 weeks, and we did have a couple guests come in. We were able to get guest astronaut Doug Hurley, who is from the Endicott area in New York, come in and talk with the students, which was really exciting. And then we pulled activities right from PBS Kids, and we used that Ready, Jet, Go was the PBS Kids show that was the base of this. And if you're not familiar with PBS programs or PBS Kids, almost all of those programs have curricula that go along with the show. And so, depending on what age you are working with, you're using a brand identity that a lot of kids are familiar with. They can watch these shows at home on their own time, but the activities are related to that theme. So with Ready, Jet, Go, it's all based on space. And so we were able to do a lot with planets. We talked about rockets. We were able to do different activities that all related to that. Different STEM club themes are science sleuths. So with this, you're going to be using your scientific method to solve mysteries. There's a lot of those available, which are a lot of fun. You can even have your students design a mystery, and for another group of students, that's a lot of fun, depending on what age group you are working with. There's coding and robotics. You can have engineering innovators. So they are doing some architecture of designing bridges, catapults. How about those Rube Goldberg machines? Those are super fun. And if you're not familiar with those, that's where like you drop a ball and then it goes through and rolls down a ramp and it hits something else and it continues to make things happen all the way around until you get to your final component, whichever, rings a bell or whatever you might want that to be. Again, bringing in that arc component, thinking about that architecture, creating those 3D models, and math weaves into all of this, which is a great way to integrate math, which is often viewed as a not fun subject. And again, that's just a blanket statement, but it is super important to infuse that into the things you're doing so that students, again, see that there's not a silo to there's math in architecture, there's math in physics, and you don't need to spend a ton of time on some of these topics, but it's a really good way for them to realize that, yes, it is all integrated together. Oh, so this one really brings in that art component. So dazzling designs in nature. This is a really fun one to do, especially with that 3 to 5 grade. And you're talking about biomimicry. So how do animals use their camouflage or different parts of who they are to help them to survive? And biomimicry plays a lot into material science. And if you're not familiar with that, one of the examples is shark skin. So shark skin, they don't have scales on their body. It's actually like skin and it's rough. And because of the shape of their skin, they don't have different types of bacteria or algae that grow on them. It actually deters those things from growing on them. And so scientists have used that similar concept of material science to develop materials for use by humans in our everyday life. So there's a lot of things in nature that we have used or tried to use in that material science component in different industries. So that's a super fun one to explore and have your students do so. Bringing in animal camouflages and those patterns, footwear designs, Those are super fun, especially if you're going to be talking about form and function, not only with human feet, but of animals. And for your local experts thinking about how you can tie them in, if you have any material science or someone in industry or fashion design, those are all great connections. It also weaves in that art component. If you were able to do field trips, a nature center or a zoo is great to work that into that theme because you are then going to see the animals. You could have them draw while they're there, or maybe those people can come into your space. That's also a great opportunity if transportation again is an issue. And then to wrap up this STEAM club, you can have a STEM fashion show or an art show showing off all of the things that you did, which is a great way to involve community and to highlight. So the parents are also seeing what you're doing as well. Music machines, another great club theme. So this brings in that science, engineering, and music. So thinking about exploring sound waves. So you have your crest and your trough, talking about the different ways that sound waves can move. And there's so much fun stuff that you can do with sound waves because when you talk about sound waves, you're thinking, okay, well, this is a hard concept because you can't see them. But there are activities that you can use that you can actually see the waves. One of those is a fancy piece of equipment called an oscilloscope. This might be a great opportunity for a community partner or someone who has an old one could donate for use or come along with, which would be great. But you can also do something simple as taking cover, putting it over a piece of material of like a drum or even a speaker. So if you have a speaker, you cover the speaker with something that's waterproof. You can put sand or rice on top of it and play music. And depending on the frequency, the sand will move to different kinds of shapes. So that's another way for students to be able to see the sound waves and kind of get an understanding of them, which is pretty interesting. And you can really push their creativity with that. You create all kinds of different musical instruments using recycled materials. The one in this picture is a simple bottle tops, baking clickers, and you could have them write their own theme song to their club. Totally fun way to do that. Integrating with your music teacher or a sound engineer would be really cool because sound engineer, again, that's that connection to a career that they can see that even though they're making something that could be seen as kind of simple, there is a job that goes along with that. And there's a lot of technology and different pieces. So having that person come in and integrate into your STEM club is a nice role model connection for them. Girls STEM Club. I have run several of these. Julia was a participant in a Girls STEM Club in Oneana with Owl and her Girl Scout club. And so with Girls, the focus is highlighting girls and underrepresented youth and encouraging them to explore STEM and STEAM concepts, creating that safe environment where everybody can be heard. And there's a whole curriculum that goes along with this. I also understand that this is could be something that might not work in the spaces you are, especially in the climate that we are in. But they do have amazing resources that are not just for girls and not just for boys. It's really a growth mindset and available for everybody. So I'm keeping, I wanted to highlight this because there's some amazing curriculum pieces in here. So in that shared drive that Abby shared, the SciGirl link for curriculum is there, and there's all kinds of engineering, tech, video content that can be integrated and pulled into classrooms, whether you're working with whomever. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so I want to take a moment just to stop and see one, if we have any questions, and the other to think about an upcoming STEM club. So you're all here because you are either going to start a club or run a club or want to reorganize your club. So Are there any club themes either that I've highlighted or that you were thinking about? Maybe as I'm talking, it kind of spurred an idea that you've jotted down that you want to explore with your student interests. Um, would you mind sharing those with the group? What could be an upcoming club theme that you could do with your students? And or does anybody have any specific questions at this moment? It's a two-parter. I'll give you just a minute because I know having to find the chat. So what kind of club theme do you want to explore maybe in either the summer or the fall with your students? And or any specific questions? And while you're thinking and typing, just want to let you know that we are going to talk about a few different activities and some additional logistics about your STEM club coming up. Rachel, Julia has led some one-day coding events for OWL, but would like to see it expanded to cover more in depth. Awesome. Can you say more about that? When you're talking about covering more in depth, in which way? Do you want to have a longer opportunity to do more coding and to build on those skills that everyone is working on? Or are you looking for additional activities to do within that coding?
So the way we've run the camp in the past is as a general like first introduction to programming for elementary age kids because the school district around here doesn't offer that at all. And it usually culminates in them doing a very basic program in Scratch or something similar. And I would love to see that be able to like become something more long term where then I can take students into working in like a real dev environment where they might that then again directly connects to careers and whatnot. But with the limited time of a day camp, like you can't bring kids from nothing to enough confidence to do that.
Yes, that is a challenge. um, so do you have the opportunity to scale this or not necessarily just because of the time constraints on yourself with you being at college?
A lot of it is time constraints on myself because I'm not physically present in Oneonta very often. It's also an equipment constraint because OWL does not have the computers all the time. We have had to borrow them for this camp. So been a big barrier as well.
And so when you're talking about that being a barrier, do you find then the students who are participating in this level of a camp do not have access to computer that would be able to do what you're doing?
It depends. I mean, for the camp specifically, for the day camp, we've been able to provide them with one, but we're approaching it as a sort of start from nothing. So I'm not making the assumption that they would have this equipment available to them at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a good assumption to have. The reason I asked that was because with location for you and time constraints, there might be a way to expand it a little bit by doing some of it virtual, either after your one day where you have gotten everybody super jazzed and excited, and then having a few after school time periods or weekend time periods that you could do something with them virtually that would continue that learning and help build up that scope. That might be another opportunity. So something to consider.
That does make sense.
And what's also great about that too is going virtual for that piece of it. You could bring in role models from across the country And so you may know or may need a connection to somebody who's doing work connected to some of the coding that you're doing. But having someone come in and just talk even for like 15, 20 minutes and then having Q&A with your students would be really neat because they get to see again that interface of having that connection of here's a person really doing this kind of work. And you could start small. So if you did your 1-day event, you could do 3 additional days. And here are the 3 additional days. Here's what we're going to be doing. One of those days is going to be, a role model is going to come in, and this is who it is. So that's another way that you might be able to scale that. And with having a lot on your plate, starting small, and testing it and seeing how it works would be super beneficial. I would also recommend having an evaluation. So what was a challenge for students? Was it a barrier having a device or not having a device? And that will help inform you for your STEM club moving forward.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that was helpful. It's exciting. I want to come to your day, day coding event. Sean, I'm trying to spin up Green Doll House Challenge, which almost got going for good in Ithaca, but didn't invest enough social capital to get beyond successful pilot. I'm trying to figure out whether it could be just a single location club or needs a network of them because it's a judged thing that's like a non-competitive competition. Also, I have equal fun doing 137 other activities, hard time focusing on one. It takes more planning, investment, community involvement. Yes. I can appreciate that. um, so the Green Doll House Challenge, I've heard of that, but I'm not super familiar like what the time constraint is on that. So that might be something super fun to, oh, hello. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, it's an activity when I did it in Ithaca, it was I had the kids make the constraints and make the possibilities, sort of like workshop with the kids first, and then we had activities, and then they did stuff on their own often, and then we came back together and had like a competitive, a non-competitive event with judges who just judged each entry on their qualities. And it's been an annual thing in other places, but I couldn't get it because it wasn't it was just another it's just another wonderful activity, like why do some things become so perennial like Kid Wind or Junior Solar Sprint, and some things just pop up and then go away? Is it our conscious decision, or yeah? So but I put so much into it that I feel like it should be it should be an annual thing, because the initial pilot took so much effort and careful organization, and it's something that was valuable to the kids. But when something requires more than one person, that's just an interesting thing. When you're a STEM education pioneer or whatever, sometimes you're alone, and sometimes you need like non-STEM people in your organization, informal or formal organization. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. Um, so Sean, are you still in Ithaca?
I work a little there. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but active in both places, or lots of places.
Gotcha. I'm actually located in Ithaca. That's why I was asking.
Okay.
Yeah, and to your point of it does take a lot of work to get pilots up and going. So to see it then not transfer into something that continues can be frustrating. I have been in a similar circumstance with different clubs where you get them up and going, and then when the core person who's really beating the drum leaves, that program leaves along with all the great work. So having advocates who are non-STEM people is super important. And I really like how you brought that in because those are the people who can also assist with making those community connections and getting people excited about the activity and keeping people excited about the activity because they're not focused as much on the nitty gritty of the different activities like you would be focused on with your students. So that's a great point. Also documenting, taking a lot of pictures, communicating what's happening, getting that community excitement up and keeping it going, especially with school administrators or even your local representatives is important because one, not only does that connect to some funding dollars, but it lets people know that this is a great activity that's going on for students in the community. How else can they be involved? Is there a volunteer opportunity for them to get involved? And then I think the one challenging thing can also be location. So some locations have a lot of opportunities for kids, and there's many locations that don't. So there could be a saturation component to that as well. And it seems like there's a lot of things going on in Ithaca, so students have a lot of opportunity to pick and choose versus maybe a location that didn't have quite as much happening. However, the theme of this aligns really well with the community ethos in that area. So yeah, if you're going to do that again.
Thanks for bringing up the keeping records or like I was going to recommend that in this meeting later that as a teacher, I learned to keep a daily journal when I was working in Poland. It was a legal requirement. And so for my organization, I keep a list of accomplishments and I just publish them. And for teaching, for my STEM club, I have a plan for the day, but I also, after the day is over, write down what we actually accomplished. Yeah.
Which is fun to see how the kids took it in a different direction sometimes. I'm sure. I love that. That's really cool. And how you did that when you were overseas. Another great way to capture some of this data, not only to get it in the moment after the students leave, is to do an exit ticket with them or have your students write in their science journals about what they did for the day. But getting quotes from your students is wonderful to go along with the other content that you were collecting. So not only would you have, photos and then a write-up of what you did, but having the direct impact coming from students is incredibly powerful. So quotes from them, quotes from their parents, those are all amazing tools, again, to get that greater community buy-in and also for funders. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Gonna keep going through. Again, if you have questions, these are great discussion points. So thank you so much for bringing these things up and talking about them. Please continue to feel free to do that as we finish out the last section of our presentation for today. So I just want to reiterate that, having that STEM club, it doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful. What's important is students having that opportunity to get their hands and their minds on just this wide exposure of activities and opportunities and careers that are out in the world. I do want to highlight some places to find curricula. Again, I just want to mention that Abby did throw the link in the chat for everybody that has some resources in there. One of those is a checklist of all the things to consider when you're doing your STEM club. One has a sample agenda in there and a breakout. And another is a working doc that will continue to expand on free resources available for educators. And one of these is PBS Learning Media. And if you're not familiar with this, I highly recommend going and checking it out. You just can Google, there's a link on that doc, but you can also just Google PBS Learning Media. It will geolocate you to your PBS station. And the PBS has worked within their state education departments to be part of classroom and out of school curricula so that state standards are tied to each pieces of this. But there's a ton of education curriculum from engaging activities. There's tons of video content. There's interactives. It is pre-K through collegiate. Most of the video content is middle through high school, and the video content isn't like an hour-long doc. It's not like an hour-long Nova. It's all been cut up into small pieces. So if you want to show a 2-minute video on how to code something specific, or lab safety as an example, or the engineering design process, you can query those things in PBS Learning Media, and it'll bring up that content, and then you can go through and see what works for you. It's free. You can just create a user ID. You do not have to be a formal educator to use it, and it's got such a wealth of data. I can't encourage people enough to be able to use that. You can also download content if you're working in a space that doesn't have internet. Not all of the content is downloadable. It depends on who produced it and what the producer rights are. So some you will see that you can, and some you'll see that you have to actually stream it. But highly recommend this resource for bringing different activities and or content. There's also role model videos on PBS Learning Media as well. So if you aren't able to find a specific role model in a content area, they would have something potentially for you. When I was talking about SciGirls has lots of great curricula. This is an example of one of the curricula pieces, and this is LED lights and using them in clothing, making soft circuits. There's a locker light up, so making simple circuits to parallel circuits and building on that tech as students go through there. Again, you can use these activities. They're not specific to just girls. They are good for everybody. They do have video that go along with it if you're interested in using it, or you can just use the curriculum and nobody knows that you're using SciGirls or not. But there's some wonderful activities, and they run the gamut again of between engineering and tech. There's healthy living. There's environmental content on there. There's some really, really fantastic, phenomenal content. So highly recommend it. NISENet, they are a great resource. They have free educator curriculum. They have how-to videos, which is really helpful from an educator standpoint, especially with content that you might not be familiar with. So they've got some great videos on how to do some of these activities. You can, again, search through content themes. You can download content, and this is an example of that biomimicry. So using synthetic gecko type through nanomolding. And so this is something that you can do with students in 3rd grade right through adult. So scaling depending on what you're doing, which is pretty exciting. So they have some amazing, wonderful free content. If you are not aware, NASA STEM engagement, they have a great educator curricula for you, things that are downloadable. You can also connect with professionals at NASA. There is a form on their site where you can request an astronaut, or you can request to talk to the ISS. They have different opportunities that pop up for classrooms. You do not, again, have to be a classroom teacher to use these resources. You can be an after school or an out of school educator for that. So highly encourage you to look at those. Also, After School Alliance and NC WIT has some amazing engineering activities, and those are all linked in the STEM Club resource doc that is in the Google Shared Drive. All right, I want to talk about role models. I know I've been adding them in as we've been going, but role models, it's just something that I can't state enough, just because of the opportunity to see a person in this role of being a coder, of being a game maker, of being an architect. There are so many amazing STEM careers out there that a lot of us have no idea that are even a real career. Looking at how quick things are changing, especially like with AI, like that's a whole nother careers that have been opened up with that computer programming. So infusing those role models into your programming and having them come in is so incredibly important because it makes that content relatable, and excites your students, especially when they can see a role model that looks like them. And so if you've never seen, what a ceramic engineer does, how would you ever know that you might be able to become one? So those role models, again, make that relevant connection. They help to break down those stereotypes of who belongs in STEM. It helps to wipe out that self-doubt and, again, creating that space that your students belong in STEM and that there is space and there is opportunity for them, even in these interesting times. So they are a great way to help spark interest in that content field that you might be doing your theme on or your activities on. And then depending on that role model and how much time you have to work with them before they work with your students, they can help with an activity. They can, besides talking about their lives, maybe there's a mentorship opportunity there, and maybe there's not, and that's totally fine. Maybe it's a one and done, but having those connections with those role models, uh, again, really super important, because if the person is coming in and talking about the neat things that they do, you never know what the connection that your students are going to grasp onto. So like, oh, this woman, she's a aerospace engineer, but she also likes horses. I like horses. And so that hook sticks with your students, and now they're paying more attention to what that person is saying. So you never know what that might be for each one of your students. SciGirls has a great repository on PBS Learning Media of role models. There's role models from, again, all walks through the science, technology, engineering, and math. There are also jobs on there that, that are trades that you don't need to go into college, but maybe an apprenticeship for. So, example, welding is it's a great career, but there's a nice connection to somebody doing that work. And what does that actually look like? I mentioned the if-then collection earlier. They have this is what a scientist looked like. This is an amazing resource. There's videos on here too, highlighting those women in STEM, talking about their experiences and their paths and their journeys, because most often our path and our journey to where we are is a crooked one. We don't take a linear path, most of us. So that's also a nice thing to be able to share and to show. As Sean was talking about earlier, thinking about evaluating and reflecting, so often we work up to the last minute before your kids are walking out the door. I know that that's something I have consistently done without taking that moment to step back and having a reflection. And having that 10 minutes of reflection can often be such an important piece for your students, but also for yourself. I really liked how Sean was talking about writing down what the students actually ended up doing during your time together, because it gives you time to reflect on what could I do different. The students really resonated with this piece more than the other. What could be for future, maybe something else comes to mind that a person that you might be able to connect with your activity that you might be able to have come in a couple weeks. So it's always a good time to take 10 minutes to be able to do that reflection. And then I highly encourage you to do exit tickets and evaluation with your students. So when I've worked with my after school programs, they've all had science journals where they keep track of their experiments, and it's theirs. So there's no wrong what they're writing down in it, which is always interesting because they want to, verbatim everything and get it in there. Like, no, it's for you to write down your design process. It's for you to write down maybe a vocab word that you're going to need to pull on. Maybe it's for you to write down how the circuit goes, or where's the positive side of an LED versus the negative side. So it's their journal to be able to write down and keep track of their science experiments during that time frame of your STEM club. But it's also a great way for them to do evaluations of the activity today. What did they like? What did they didn't like? Or they can do that on an exit ticket and give that to you. And again, highly recommend getting quotes from your students, because that's going to show that impact of the work that you're doing and how important that is. And you can use that in a bunch of different ways, whether it be for funding or for community support. So some things that we've already touched on. One of the pieces I think that gets left off of having STEM clubs is celebrating your students, celebrating all the work that they've done. And I understand sometimes if you're doing a one-day event that can be challenging, because the whole day is kind of a celebration. But if you are able to, having either, wrapping up your STEM club, or maybe if it's a one-day event, it's the last 40 minutes of the event, but having a specific time where the students can showcase what they did. They can involve their family in that, because that's incredibly powerful. Families have the biggest influence on what careers they are going to have or explore moving forward. So really engaging families is critical if we want to encourage kids to be going towards those STEM careers. It's also a great way to show funders, administrators, government leaders what you're doing. So even if they only show up for a 40-minute time period, it's very important for them to see that impact of kids learning in the space that you have them with. And you might think, oh gosh, it's only for such a small period of time. It opens doors for you. So I highly encourage you to work that in, if you are able to, into your STEM club. And having that communication plan, keeping your families, your parents, the school admin, all informed about what's going on with the club and the events. Because the more they know about, the more they're going to champion, the more they're going to want to get involved and or get more people involved. So thinking about communication is another great component. And if this seems like, oh my goodness, this is too much, recruit somebody to do that piece for you. You're not doing this alone. So don't think that you have to do all of that. You do the best you can with what you have. But communicating, that might be a great volunteer position that someone else can join and take pictures and do. Okay, budgeting, the money piece. Some of the things that you want to consider are those, of course, your materials, equipment. Maybe you're able to borrow some. Guest speakers. I'm hoping that your guest speakers are going to come in and don't need or require money. Depending on how far they're coming from, maybe they will take, a travel, or maybe, a gift card to a local coffee shop or something. Snacks for your kids. Technology needs, transportation. These are all things to think about when you're budgeting for that STEM club, thinking about the needs of your students, right? So this is going to change depending on the club, the place, your students, but all things that you want to consider. Another component is partnerships. Partnerships are, I think, just as important as having role models, because they help you to find businesses that might want to donate, might donate equipment, they might donate professionals with their time, a university that can donate space, or your kids can go into their labs or go to see what they're doing, which is, again, a great way to be able to open some of those doors. You might be able to connect with research, high-end community outreach. There's a lot of community outreach that universities do. A lot of businesses also look to do community outreach. So there's a great opportunity to connect with the business to see if you can get their people to come in, but then they usually will bring items with them, which is exciting. So when you're creating that STEM club and you're thinking about that theme, thinking about what businesses are local, and or if it's not local, thinking again about that virtual opportunity. I mean, that is one of the benefits I think that came out of COVID, is that we have a bigger view of who can be involved in the things that we're doing. You know, it really is global. The last little tips I want to leave you with is some pitfalls. So don't try to jump in and do a full year STEM club if you haven't done one before. That's really ambitious, which is amazing, but you're going to burn yourself out. So don't do too much too soon. You know, start with that pilot, start with something small, and reassess and reevaluate after a 4-week or a 6-week period. Involve your students. You know, you are doing this for them. So get their feedback. What do they want to do? What are they interested in? If they're interested in engineering, what kind of engineering? Have those conversations with them. And maybe you start with some general stuff, but have their feedback on what they might want like the next 4 weeks to look like. Another thing is inconsistent meeting schedules. So when you're setting up that schedule, pick your day, pick your time, and stick with it for a set period of time. And that should be within a short period. So example, you don't want to meet, you know, one Saturday and then 3 months later you're meeting another Saturday if these things are connected, because it's too much time and it's disjointed. So you really want to be able to package that all together when you are starting that STEM club or starting that theme, so that everybody's on the same page going forward. Not documenting impact, super important. Get those quotes, get the photos, get photo releases if you're going to be using those images. Highly recommend that. Keep your kids involved. Celebrate their wins, showcase their work. They definitely want to be able to show off things that they're doing. So invite those families to do like a mini expo or kind of a show and tell. And then have your students be part of that leadership team as your club grows. So if you are moving, you know, Julia, I don't know if you are able to take that 1-day model and grow it out, but maybe there's some student leaders. Maybe there are additional students where you're going to school who might want to be involved as well. So having a leadership team to help distribute that work is also another great way to get more people involved and to get more voices to the tables.